Good to go. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the May 25th, 2023 City Council Community Building Subcommittee meeting. We'll do just a quick roll call. Councilor Broadman. Here. Councilor Norris. Here. And we know that Councilor Campbell, it will be here. She has an appointment. She's running a little late, but we will go ahead and get started. So with that, I think we can still move forward with approval of the February and March meeting minutes. So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All right. Look at that. That was easy. All right. So we're just going to move into, I'll kind of give the quick overview of this, and then I'll turn it over to our engineering team and Ryan to kind of lead the conversation. So what we want to do, we're really hoping this is our kind of our last big kind of planning conversation on this. And the reason we wanted to come back to you again is we've had several conversations with both council and this committee on the key routes. We call it, the goal around the north, south, east, west key routes. We've been continuing to refine that process through our conversation. So we originally just started with what are we trying to achieve in the concept. I think we've had conversations around the wayfinding as well as kind of what we're trying to do with the key routes and the destination points. And then what the team's been doing since then is really refining the routes and even looking at like every section of the route, what is needed, what are there, again, still looking at options of kind of what are there alternatives that we should be looking at. And that's what Ryan's going to do today. He's going to show you what we are planning to call the north, south, and east, west routes. There are a couple questions that we do have for the subcommittee around that, because there's still a couple places we could go left or we could go right. And we want to make sure that we're meeting your intention before we go into final scoping and contracting for many of these things. Some of them are already moving, which Ryan will go over. Some of them are already built. And then we have I think we have like one project that's going to come through and clean up all the missing pieces that we don't have in different contracts. So we just want to make sure we're getting the scope right, because we really want to move and kind of move aggressively on this, because we know this is a critical goal. But we also want to make sure that we're hitting the mark on kind of what the expectations are. So again, one last kind of check-in. And then the second item we had was around the raised crossing with the bike ped crossings. This really came up during the Wildflower Master Plan project. I think we might be able to interweave that into the first topic of conversation, but if we need more clarification around that, we can definitely come back as we'll come back as that second item after this. But as Ryan goes through this, if there is interest, we can kind of blend those two conversations together if it makes sense, or if we need additional clarity, we'll kind of come back to that second agenda item. So with that, I'm just going to turn this over to Ryan, and he will kind of lead us through the process here.
Perfect. Thank you, Russ. So I've got Kevin with me here today. He is the assigned project manager to the yet to be solidified name. I'm calling it the Frankenstein project, but it's meant to capture all of the things that were not already encompassed in a contract that we have existing today. So what we're hoping to get through today, we're going to give a real quick brief history of kind of how we got to where we are today. This shouldn't be really any news to anybody, but just want to make sure everybody's understanding that. Then we're going to take a little bit of a dive into a mapping tool that Kevin's created with our OPM staff here in the city that kind of shows you all the things that we've evaluated and how we've come to the conclusion that we're at of where this alignment should be. And then within that discussion, hopefully if it works out okay, we've embedded the raised crossing discussion as well as a kind of a case study of the Butler Boyd Acres project, which is one of the contracts we have under design right now. And so I've got George and Matt and a whole bunch of other people back here that can answer any question you could possibly have. So don't be surprised if a couple of folks are coming up at some point in time here. And then hopefully by the end of this, we'll have a quick recap of what we understand as the available funding. And then the ultimate goal is we can walk out of here with kind of an agreement and a head nod so that Kevin can hit print on his scope of work and we can get a contract or a consultant on board to get all these missing sections starting to get designed. Ultimately, we know it was a goal in the last biennium. It's evolved a little bit. We're well aware that this is one of the key goals for council of the next biennium. So our objective is to make sure that these two routes are 100% complete to council standard by the end of the new biennium that's about to start.
Right. And I want to interject one thing. We'll also be looking for direction from the subcommittee does the subcommittee feel, hello, Councilor Campbell. Does this subcommittee feel okay with directing kind of staff to move forward with the information that's being presented, or should some of this is there a need to bring any of this back to the full council for an update before the team moves forward with it? So as we go through this information, please be thinking about that. Obviously, there's some other things that have come out that have recently that have been working, some subcommittees that have kind of caused some discussions around what should be in the subcommittee, what being councils. We just want to make sure that we hear from this group at the end of the day. Are we good to go, or should we kind of come to a work session in front of council in the very near future around this?
Sounds good.
Key routes.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So the wayfinding
Mhm.
is, I mean, it's sort of decoupled from this conversation. Are we going to talk about that today too?
Yeah,
Okay.
part of
Yeah.
that, part of that has to do with the alignments that we've chosen.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so just a quick glimpse back in the history and time. So I thank you, Kevin, for helping put this together, but all the work that's kind of happened to get us to where we are today. So the city first started discussing strategic implementation for walking and biking infrastructure back in 2013, 14, and 15. The phrase key routes started being used back then as well. Previous work that's been done to date is neighborhood greenways. So 3 previous phases of that have been built, and we're going to highlight part of that's embedded in the alignment that we've chosen to recommend here. There is a final phase, which is part of what Kevin's going to be completing here as we move forward. There's the 2019 Community Climate Action Plan, which prioritized bike and ped work. The adoption of the 2020 TSP, which I think we're all familiar with here, that really outlined what we define as level of stress and low stress networks for both biking and walking. And then ultimately the 2020 Geo Bond was a huge help to kind of get a lot of this work initiated. And then more recently, the 2021 council goals, the work from the Transportation Bond Oversight Committee, even the infamously named Mendez-Brodmann proposal that's been reviewed a few times. Yeah. Yeah. And then there's been comp plan updates both in 22 and 23 and different figures that have been adopted throughout the last couple of years. The 2022 standards and specs update, which is another big step forward to help us get to where we are today, that identified where we would build these level of stress systems and helped us define what we mean by protected versus buffered and that kind of stuff. And then, of course, all this is overlaid with the DLCDs, CFEC rules and stuff like that. And then the 2023 contract that's out right now for wayfinding and branding. And then multiple other projects that we have underway from Wilson to Butler Boyd to Bear Creek and 27th, which we'll talk about in more detail as well. So there's been a lot of work by a lot of different people over the last 5 to 7 years that have kind of gotten us to this point where we feel like we're right at this inflection point where hopefully after this or maybe a future council update, we can honestly say we are moving on every single aspect of each of these alignments, and we don't need to wait around for any further decisions. There will likely be continual follow-up, and we'll hit this a little bit at the end. As much as we would like to build a fully protected network on both of these alignments, there's just not enough funding in the construction fund and in the Geo Bond. So our focus is on a connected system that will encourage ridership of all ages, something that parents would be comfortable with their kids on. And then there'll be more evolution of key routes over the years as further funding is identified. And we start to build kind of the spokes off of these main alignments that we're going to go over today. So,
and Ryan, if
pause there.
Yeah, I just want to catch Councilor Campbell up since you just came in. What we're going to be showing you is we're going to walk through, we have further refinement on the north, south, and east, west routes. So we're going to walk through each section of that and say, this is what we're doing or not doing. It's complete. It's not complete. If it's not, this is what we can do with the funding we have available. And there's a couple sections where we're still trying to, there's maybe 1 or 2 options. We want to make sure that we have clarity on what we want so that we can actually go fully under contract on all sections of this and get it moving. So and hopefully this is kind of our last conversation around this besides you seeing contracts and other things in front of council.
Okay.
Make sense?
Thank you. And I'm so sorry, I don't remember if we've met.
No, I don't believe so. I'm Kevin Howard.
Hi.
I'm a project engineer.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and sorry about, Kevin's going to be
Oh, I'm gonna fix
managing the gaps of all of these things. So there's Geo Bond projects, there's transportation construction fund projects, and Kevin gets to do everything in between to make sure that these are connected systems.
Kevin.
So yeah.
Thank you.
So we're going to start by looking at the east-west alignment. We think this is a relatively easy one to go over. There's still a couple decision points in here But we'll kind of highlight, if you can zoom in a little bit, let's start over at the UGB boundary on the east side of town there. So we really think that there's a good route. Wilson had been discussed as the east-west route previously. It's getting done here this year, but Wilson doesn't go all the way to 27th, right? And Wilson doesn't go all the way to the east side of town. So it's a good segment, and we think it'll be a good addition to the system overall. But Bear Creek and then kind of up through Franklin and over Hawthorne and further west is where we really think we can build what we believe is council's intent. So starting over on the east side, there's the affordable housing project out there. We have a GEO bond project right now, and it's the Bear Creek 27th Street project. And Sinclair is going to help deliver that. What that's going to do is it's going to build a key route from the UGB boundary out there on Bear Creek. And it's going to go all the way down Bear Creek through the roundabout that's yet to be built at the intersection of Purcell and Bear Creek, and then all the way over to the Larkspur Trail and where that comes up and hits Bear Creek. So there's a huge segment of road in there. The whole road is still built to county standards. It's got missing sidewalks and curbs all over the place through there. So there's a good amount of right of way in a lot of the locations along here that we believe we can do a good alternatives analysis to see what would work best, if it's buffered, if it's protected, if it's a cycle track, or whatever the alternative may be that we can afford. That Bear Creek seems like the most likely answer to help get that good connection going on the east side of town. So, and then that'll also connect to 27th. Part of Sinclair's project is also to build a good pedestrian or good bike connection, at least from Reed Market to Highway 20 along that side of 27th as well. So I know the neighborhood association out there has been asking for that for a long time. So that'll be good to be able to address that.
And then we've got private development that's going to carry that even further down between Reed Market and Ferguson. And then the southeast area will continue out even further south and around the loop. So we've got development kind of finishing up the 27th corridor.
So yeah, that's a good example of a spoke off of the main east-west alignment and being able to connect into this in the future. So we're moving along Bear Creek here. Sinclair's project has a little bit of a gap in it. So this is kind of where Kevin would come in. The scope of work for Sinclair's project goes to the Larkspur Trail. And I know Councilor Broadman, you had brought this up before, like, okay, how are we going to take care of that gap between Larkspur and Coiner? And that will be either written into Kevin's or we just amend Sinclair's contract to include that work. But as you get through here, we continue down Bear Creek. We provide a continuous connected route. And then we get to where our first decision point would be here. And that's when you kind of get to the, if you can see that, okay, the near 10th Street, not far from Bear Creek Elementary School right there. So this is where we can tie into the Coiner Trail, which we believe is the lowest stress network you can get, is something that's separated from the road completely, or for the most part, and you can remove that conflict between bikes and peds and vehicles. And so the yellow is what we're recommending as the chosen east-west alignment. You can see it takes a little bit of an angle here and runs kind of north-south. And when we overlay this with the north-south alignment, you'll see how that makes a lot of sense. But to point out some other things we've evaluated, the TSP right now would tell us we need to go down Glenwood on the south side of Bend High School and then do a little button hook and come back up 6th Street. We can do that, but we feel like, why not just point people to Coiner Trail?
Why does the TSP say that? Right?
That's, yeah.
This one, the TSB is along the Coiner Trail. So I think it's a good example, but this yellow line is the TSP up Coiner Trail for right now.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. Good. Thank you. And I think it's the key route map then.
Oh, okay.
In the
But we're allowed,
TSP.
we think we're allowed to deviate from that.
So yes. So I'm glad you asked that question.
Yeah.
And we're happy to pause here for a moment.
And let me
Yeah.
before Elizabeth comes up, because I just want to frame like at the 30,000 foot level, what we're trying to do based off of previous conversations with council. So what we are trying to do is create a system from our understanding, based off the last conversations we had, for young children or people who are not comfortable riding bikes through town or comfortable being on the street with our existing network. We're trying to get them through town to basically major destinations in town, especially the core area of town. So that's when we're talking about options of go this way or this way, the reason the engineering team is presenting what they're presenting is because we're trying to hit that like target person for the trail usage based off our previous conversations. Because again, lots of options here, but that's from our understanding, that is what we're trying to do with this north, south, east, west goal is to hit that level of rider and that level of stress. So that's instead of using like level of stress 1, 2, 3, it's like, that's really, I was, when we were talking about this before, is one of those things of say you're on the east part of town or the southeast part of town and your kid wants to go to Juniper. This is the route that you want to tell them to take to get to Juniper. That's the thought process that we're doing for this project. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Elizabeth? Yeah.
Is this the right way? So we have the TSP identifies a low stress network map. And on that low stress network map also identifies certain key routes that are a subset of that low stress network. We also have in the TSP a project list that identifies a certain set of projects needed to implement the key routes. We have in the comprehensive plan policy that says, as we're going through and either with private development or the city planning and design process, planning for these routes, we have flexibility in where the routes go. If we realize something in design or planning, like, oh, we can't meet ProAg or ADA standards with this route that was identified, but we can over here. So we have flexibility in planning and design of exactly where the routes go. We have some sideboards of what we would consider. Those are in the comprehensive plan policy. We still have the TSP project list of projects planned to implement the originally planned key routes. So if what you're doing is modifying a route that doesn't abandon a listed project, we have that flexibility just as is without any further steps. If what you need to, if through planning, what we decide is that project we identified, that's no longer the right project, that's where we would come back and need to do a TSP update to identify the different project that we need to do. There's also the overlay of the bond resolution and project list, but I think that's enough governing documents to talk about for now.
And as we go through this, remember the elements of the TSP, we contemplated other funding sources, potentially a second bond over the planning horizon. So we are not proposing to remove any projects from the TSP. It's more of adjusting kind of where our original focus was and what was kind of near term as identified in the TSP. If we need to adjust that, we believe the flexibility, but we just want to make sure everyone understands. We're not saying, if we say that we were originally going to be on this corridor and we're deciding to go over here, we're not abandoning need to still upgrade that existing corridor. We just don't have the funding at this time to do it. So it could be a second bond or some other funding mechanism that comes in later years to complete that project.
So, right, the TSP is that 20-year plan, like ultimately over 20 years, this is what we need to do. If we have shorter term goals now to put in something in the interim, a different improvement before we get to a funding source for that finally identified project in the TSP, we do have that flexibility.
And is it a possibility that, I could be completely wrong, but I think we're redoing the TSP as part of CFAC rules.
At some point we will be.
Some parts of it may need to be reopened.
So is it possible that we would
adjust
the TSP to reflect the reality on the ground?
Yeah, so I think part of that, when and how we open up the TSP needs to be consideration. We don't want to prematurely open it up and then have to comply with CFAC. Right? We want to open it up when we have to comply with CFAC, and when we have to open it up, we should do the tinkering so we don't have to open it again.
Got it.
Right?
So, and I think also that's why legal's here as well. I mean, I don't want council to worry too much about all those technical semantics, but we want to hear what you're thinking is the preferred route. And then we will make sure that we are in compliance with all the comp plans and the TSP, or if something needs to happen, we will let you know around that.
What does the TSP say we should do?
The TSP has, it's really kind of just, I think, more timing and.
So the TSP has, it identified a system of low stress networks and identified key routes on a map. And then it said, to get these key routes to a level of stress 1 or 2, here's a list of projects that we've identified that you need to do. That's where that sort of big picture, almost $20 million number came from, was a selected projects identified to build the key routes.
But Bear Creek is not.
No, Bear Creek is, but as we go through this, there are some areas where we were trying to comply with what was in that kind of near-term TSP plan.
Got it.
But when we actually really looked at it and started refining, it's like, maybe there's an alternative that may be either through funding or just condition of that system, it might be better to move it over to this other segment. And we still are, I think we're obtaining the overall goals that we're trying to achieve, but we do have to make sure that we stay in compliance with all the technical documents and the rules around that, right?
We're
So-
not deleting the provision of the TSP.
Yeah, we may just be switching around the timing of when that, in the TSP, when that improvement was planned to be done, right?
And then when you say update the TSP, what's the process for that? Is it-
So it's a post-acknowledgement plan amendment to
Mhm.
the adopted comprehensive plan. So it's a legislative amendment that would go through the process outlined in the Bend Development Code. So Planning Commission, City Council, all the public notice and public process.
And we're not
And
gonna
then
tell you,
approval by DLCD.
there are some significant things that we need to consider about when and how we open the TSP, especially with the climate friendly rules that are, because there are some significant implications of like, if you open that document, then you have to do all this additional work and comply with these certain things. So we want to be very strategic on when we do that in kind of conjunction with all the other growth management work we need to do.
So updating would be opening up the TSP and we probably would wait till we have the CFAC.
Yeah.
to do all that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we don't want, what Russ saying, we don't want to inadvertently trigger CFAC work that we're planning to do 2 or 3 years from now because we just want to change a bike route, right? Like if there's a different way to adjust the route while still planning for that bike route project, and then we get to the TSP updates for CFAC, then we can do a deeper dive, what's the right answer over the 20-year period for these particular projects? Are they what we said they were in 2020, or have we learned something new? We want something
Yep.
different now.
As we go through this, we always kind of just look at legal on each section and say, still good, still good. That's why they're here, because they help us keep us in the safe zone.
So none of this has to do with whether it's Bear Creek or Wilson. Deciding that we think Bear Creek is better than Wilson, that's just fine,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
right?
Bear Creek so Kevin brought up the map he's got here.
Mhm.
These are the 12 key routes in the TSP.
Mhm.
This is what it said. We should aim and strive to build these in the next 20 years.
Got it.
All of
Right
these.
now,
Yeah.
we're working on that near-term goal.
Correct.
One
Yes.
east-west, one north-south.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's nothing specific about how we do east-west or how we do
Well,
north-south,
So there
as long as it includes the
yeah.
key route pieces
Mhm.
that are in the TSP.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
and so, I mean, I thought the last time we saw the map, it was Wilson instead of Bear Creek. I agree, Bear Creek is a
Yeah.
better, this
Mhm.
is all fine with me.
Mhm.
And yeah, we are learning that it's fine with the
It-
TSP as well.
And the reason we looked at moving from Wilson to Bear Creek was
Uh-huh.
twofold. One, get further east, right?
Right, yeah.
And then
no,
even with
just-
Wilson, there's still a lot of kind of, I would say unknowns with with On A and what's kind of going on in that Midtown area and how we're going to move people through there. But we also thought we really want to get across the full part of town, get out to 27th, right? And be able to really move people. And that's why,
Affordable housing project.
and Wilson is still a good key route in this system that will connect to
Well,
it.
sure,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, no, great,
Make
got
sense?
it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Anthony.
so 12 key routes in the TSP. The TSP even further in figure 5.3B said, here are components of those 12 key routes
Mhm.
that we specifically want to build.
Mhm.
And that had a price tag of $24 million. Then we passed the Geo bond that gave us $19 million. So we've got 19 of the 24 needed of the subset of projects to build the whole TSP. So again, it's a 20-year outlook. But to your point, Councilor Campbell, we're trying to meet the near-term goal right now, which means, kind of shuffling the deck just a little bit. So a good example of that is the work that we just mentioned on Bear Creek, that's Route R2E. There's a very good description in here. It says Bear Creek Road from Cessna Avenue east to the UGB, build a shared use path adjacent to the roadway, close the sidewalk gaps and create a low-stress bike network extending to the new affordable housing project.
Yep.
$2.7 million. So that's what's in Sinclair's scope of work right now. So we're combining a lot of this stuff together. So yeah, so that gets us, big picture, that all makes sense as we
Yes.
drive back
So-
in. Okay.
And are we up to Franklin then?
We're-
Yes, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so
Because, I'm sorry, I just came in on
Yeah.
Bear Creek. Bear
Yeah.
Creek curves, it's Bear Creek all through that curve.
Then we hit the
until you
Coiner
get-
Trail.
Okay, okay, got it. yeah.
and I don't want council to get overly wrapped up around key routes and what's in what plan and what's in what list.
Right.
We are doing that and we are presenting that as we go through this, we will tell you where there is a deviation and whether or not we're okay. So again, it's really just look at how do we want to move people across town? That's really the question that we want to make sure we're addressing right.
So yeah, as staff, we're recommending the yellow alignment. Route 1, which is the redder type alignment, that doesn't seem to make sense to us to kind of do this button hook around Bend High when we feel like doing this cross section here of Coiner, it actually combines the north-south and the east-west. And when we turn them both on, you'll see they both utilize that same stretch of Coiner that exists today. So that's less money we got to spend. So this gets you then basically up to that roundabout at the corner of Juniper Park. So you've got Bend High right there to the south. You've got Juniper Park. And again, this is really focused on destinations, and that's connected to the wayfinding project. You know, how do you tell somebody if you're on the east side, like, oh, kids, if you want to go swimming to Juniper Park, follow the red signs, and I'm making that up too, and that'll get you to Juniper Park. So then once you get into the Juniper Park area, this is where we had a good, interesting internal discussion, is then you start transitioning into the Midtown Crossing ideas. And so you've got Franklin, Greenwood, and Hawthorne. We all understand Hawthorne is the best solution when it's here. It's not going to be here in the next 2 years, though. So what we would recommend, though, is we want to take folks kind of through the Juniper Park area. We would still like to get people to Hawthorne itself, because you've got the bus station right there. And then we have a safe crossing on 3rd Street already. We have the flashing beacon on 3rd and Hawthorne that exists today. So that's going to be the safest way to get people across 3rd Street. And then eventually they'll go another block and they'll start riding up a ramp to get over the parkway on the Hawthorne Bridge. In the meantime, no, we're going to cross 3rd Street. We want to get them to 2nd Street. 2nd Street is part of the work that's going to be included in the Midtown Crossing project that council helped us prioritize. It's doing Franklin, Greenwood, and the streetscape along 2nd. So we're going to get people to 2nd Street. And then from there, they could choose if you want to go up to Greenwood and do whatever the interim fix might be. But we're recommending that we would direct folks down to Franklin and use the Franklin underpass, because we're going to be building that in the next couple years. And that'll get you across Franklin, across Hill Street, and over to Harriman, because the easiest way to connect into the existing network of greenways that we have today is to take Harriman from Franklin all the way down to Delaware. Because Delaware is a greenway today that exists. It's got the sharrows, it's got the speed bumps, it exists today. So again, that's it. We can save some money by not having to build something because we're tying into what's already there today. Let's
pause, because this is where the big kind of cross connection happens of the routes, and where this is where we want to make sure we're in tune, because it does affect the north-south route as well and how we connect in. You know, we were kind of looking at getting people to Juniper, getting people to the core area as that developed, getting people to downtown, and then, as Ryan said, getting people, safely over to the west side as well. And once we get to the west side, it's pretty clean, but it's really this kind of mashup in the core area of town, and Hawthorne and Franklin. We want to make sure, does that make sense? Does anyone have questions that we can, or concerns that we want to make sure get addressed in the design?
I have. So I am not a bike commuter, but I am a human being. And I know that human beings don't like to go out of their way when there's
Correct.
a straight shot. So the straight shot from the Lava Bear roundabout is Greenwood or Franklin, I'm sorry,
correct.
is, you just turn left and you go down Franklin. Are people really going to follow the red signs in order to get up to Hawthorne and then 2nd and then come back?
So
My
great question. People are going to use different
of
routes
course
to do
they
that,
are.
right?
Yeah, right.
I'm going back to the framing question that we had of who are you building this for? So if you're telling your kid where
Right.
to go,
Uh-huh.
this route, in theory, do you want your kid riding on Franklin? I guess this is the question,
Right.
right? Or do you want them riding on through Juniper, Hawthorne, 2nd Street to, a small section of the Franklin underpass that we can make as safe as possible, right? So again, those are the, yep, like I would choose Franklin if I was riding by myself. But if I had my kid
Mhm.
or young kid, I would probably go up to the Hawthorne and do the out of the way travel. Both will be available to the riders. Yeah.
Well, sure, no,
Right.
but I'm just thinking in terms of
Yeah.
investment.
It's a great
on
question.
A little bit of loop that might not be used. Seems like we had that same kind of question behind the Newport Market. And there was talk about diverting that greenway, and we just decided that, no, people just are not going to do that. They are going to do what they've always done, and we need to just make what they've always done safer, was my
Well, that was-
memory of
we're-
that.
We're talking
right?
Portland, like we couldn't do everything we want to do in Portland.
Yeah,
so it's-
exactly. But,
Yeah,
or Newport, right?
yeah.
But, and this is kind of that same thing, we just don't have the opportunity to improve safety on Franklin much from what it is right now.
We can, but I think what we were trying to balance here is that 5 years from now, it's going to be the Hawthorne Bridge.
There you go. Yeah,
So the
right.
idea was, let's start getting people used to going to that.
Yeah. okay.
Again, somebody might choose on this stretch, well, I can ride the Franklin
Of course. I
undercrossing.
mean,
I don't need
people
to
are
take
gonna
the
ride
bridge.
wherever, no
But
matter how
this
much
was
it is.
like
Sure.
The
Yeah.
interim fix. So let's take advantage of.
No, that makes sense.
Hawthorne.
I honestly, I hadn't thought of in terms of that, that this is also the alignment we want for the
For the
future.
future, yeah.
Right, thank you. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with like having both. I am mindful of the fact that kids are gonna go on Frank, if you're going to Ben High,
Mhm.
kids coming from the BCD or the
Mhm.
south or the
Yes.
west, probably gonna stay in Franklin.
They're gonna be on Franklin.
So I
That's right.
agree, we can't just give up on Franklin. I
Right.
don't think that's what anybody's suggesting.
Exactly,
No.
yeah.
We gotta do the best we can there, but having the Proto solution on Hawthorne,
Mhm.
because we know we're gonna have to beef up Hawthorne because that bridge is gonna happen.
Thank you. No,
Yeah.
honestly, that is the correct answer in my
Both,
mind
I
is,
think
yeah,
it's
oh,
both.
yeah, it does. It has to do with the future
Yeah.
of Hawthorne.
Right.
Not just this little weird loop that gets you to Second and then on Franklin, which, yep, thank you. Okay,
Is there any way to beef up the Franklin corridor to make it more safe, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly look at that stretch there. I mean, the undercrossing work, we know we're already including as a part of the Midtown project, but if we're talking, from Second back to Juniper, yeah, there's certainly stuff we could look at through there. I mean, it's a heavily trafficked area today, just when the kids get out of school. I mean, there's a lot of kids crossing Franklin.
And it narrows at the turn for
Yeah.
Red High.
Mhm.
You lose a lane, I think.
There's a lane drop coming out of the Third Street intersection heading east. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we also want to be cautious of, again, setting the right expectations,
Right.
right? Because we do not have the money to completely rebuild Franklin, once we get on the other side of Third Street. And Garrett's here, he can talk about what he's scoping on those undercrossing projects and what came out of Borough too on Second Street, right? And where his kind of
Exactly. I
scope, so-
thought, I'm sorry, but I thought the core area urban renewal was doing some improvements. to
Yes.
Franklin between the underpass and Third Street,
Garrett, I want to make sure.
Underpass fit, yeah.
underpass and Fifth, right?
Yeah.
Good, okay.
So it is one of those questions of, that's why we wanted to talk to you, because it's like, do we want to put that investment in, up at Hawthorne, right? Because, or should we try to do as much as we can on Franklin? I mean, those
That's
those are
exactly my
those are
question.
kind of those,
But I think you have answered it.
Okay.
And yes, go ahead and invest in this Hawthorne
Yeah.
alignment. That's what we're gonna want in the future. And we're also, it doesn't mean we're not doing Franklin.
No.
We
yeah,
are
no.
doing improvements to Franklin.
Mhm.
Some of them will be required with development. Some of them have to do with core area
With core
improvements.
area
and
Right.
contributions,
and,
yeah.
and I think it helps us, like, as we pursue grants and too, as well, we can say, we've got everything pointing to this bridge.
Okay,
It's
There you go.
built, it's ready for, it's like, it's those type of things as
Yeah.
well, right?
all right.
I'm sure we'll have the wayfinding that will encourage people to go.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
use off.
Yeah.
That's,
And again, the safest crossing of Third today is at Hawthorne, where you've got the beacon that you can hit
Right.
that has the flashing lights.
yeah.
I mean,
think
you
that's
can,
right.
you can of course go to the light and the signal at Franklin and Third. But that's the safest
But,
possible
like,
crossing.
The filter and lenses I was always using is, I've got a 10, 11-year-old kid that wants to get across Third Street.
Right.
Where do I want them to cross?
Right.
That's
You
right.
Don't want
Kind-
them at the place where traffic is moving in 12 different
Right,
directions.
right.
Right, right.
So
That Hawthorne, traffic's just coming this way.
that's why
right?
it's really
Yeah.
important to frame what we're trying to design to, because that really impacted our decision process of why we're presenting what we're presenting.
We just throw in two other things, and I don't want to hold this up too much.
Yeah.
In terms of catalyzing housing and going right by the new Catalyst project.
Mhm.
This is a positive. It also, there's a lot of people who use the bottle drop on bikes. This goes right there. The more investment in there, and obviously there's a lot of urban issues right around there, and the more investment in there, I think helps us with some of the safety issues and complaints from neighbors. So I think it hits a ton of.
Good.
All right.
Thank you.
Let's keep going then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Um,
Great discussion.
Great.
Yeah, thanks. So that gets us past the Parkway. We get across the street here. We came to another decision point if you want to turn on the Greenways layer. So Greenways Phase 4, which is the last phase of the Greenways project, would actually have us build a parallel Greenway on Georgia, right? So it exists on Delaware today. If we weren't doing the rest of this and Kevin was told to just go finish Greenways Phase 4, he'd go build 2 blocks away, he'd build another Greenway on Georgia. So we can certainly do that. We think we're going to need to find every penny we can get. So we're recommending we don't build this parallel Greenway on Florida, but instead, or on Georgia, but instead we take advantage of what exists today on Delaware. So, but again, to your out of direction question, Councilor Campbell, is somebody going to go that far south? If we wayfind it correctly, they will, because it depends where you want to go though. Because if you want to get to Galveston, you're probably just going to weave your way through downtown and go past Drake Park, and then you're going to, hit Galveston. But in terms of the east-west route, we want to just connect folks down to Delaware. We think that'll be a good connection for folks coming out of the box factory, in the timber yard development. We're going to get them safely, whether it's up Sizemore or something like that. We're going to get them up to Delaware. And then the red is what exists today from a Greenways portion, and a little bit of that angle that's up there that you kind of take that sharp turn. But that's the Greenways today. And then ultimately that gets you to Columbia Park.
Yeah, and that little notch that's all grade. That's grade related and basically brings you right into McKay Park. So what's that road that goes up the hill? I always forget that one. That
Shasta.
So
Yeah.
Shasta is that angled road. So you got to kind of get up and out, and that's why we've got that little.
Mhm.
There's that blip there.
So yeah, existing infrastructure today, that's already known as a greenway. So again, if we wayfind this and enhance the awareness of that, we would ultimately get folks down to the bridge at Columbia Park. And so that once somebody can cross the park there, then you're across the river. And then we would again take advantage of some of the stuff that exists today. What is that? I always Cumberland, thank you. Because I believe that's marked as a greenway today.
Yeah, and it's flat. It's
Yeah.
flatter.
Yeah.
than
So again,
other
we're
streets and
taking advantage of existing infrastructure already there. We don't need to invest anything else in it. Once you get all the way down though, you take Cumberland and you go all the way down to 15th there. That's when you make this connection to the north. Ultimately, we're trying to get people to what's the name of that trail?
West Bend.
West Bend Trail. Thank you. If you're on Skyline, there's that completely separated trail. That's a great system to use there. So how do we get folks from the, point A to point B and get them to that trail up there? So this is the alignment we think we could build that gets folks there most efficiently. It also crosses Galveston, so somebody could take advantage of hitting Galveston and going whatever direction you may want to go from there as well. And then once you're on that West Bend Trail, that takes you out and that continues fairly far to the east, takes you through Northwest or pretty close to Northwest Crossing, gets you out to the destinations of the high school, middle school, and elementary school over there. And ultimately, however far west you may feel like going.
And I'm just going to interject one thing into this conversation, which is not going to be part of this project, but when we start talking about the transportation fee, and if we get more revenue coming in for street maintenance, when you think about Hartford and 15th, we would probably be engaging with conversations with council of, do you want to prioritize those? If we get more funding and we start moving into residential areas, do you want us to prioritize kind of street maintenance in those bicycle bicycle key route greenways areas first, right? Where do we want to invest if we can get more O&M money coming in? Because this project is not going to, if you go on Hartford now, it's pretty beat up, right? And it's a residential street, it's bumpy, it's all alligatored out, very low PCI. Right now, we don't have the money in our O&M to go into the residential road system, but if we do, these will be questions of if you want to keep improving the system outside of this, O&M would be the next dollars we could apply to these key routes as well, because we're using existing facilities, if that makes sense.
You know what I think? I think a pothole is just an upside down speed up. I bet, kind of serious, bad conditions on a greenway might.
I
be
agree with you,
slowing
but
those cars down for us.
as a rider, trying to encourage
Right,
ridership.
but how bad is it for
It's-
bikes?
if-
I know that doesn't necessarily.
I will tell you, it's much better on a mountain bike than it is on a road bike.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
And if you want to experience road conditions and PCI and the best way to ride a road bike around town, you'll know very quickly what a low PCI is. But again, we're not trying to solve that here. It's just, that's another tool in the toolbox potentially to keep improving these key routes across the entire system. All right.
So, any other discussion on the east-west route? Do we feel comfortable that that's going to meet council's intent?
Definitely for me.
Okay.
I like this one better than the ones we've been looking at.
Yeah.
I think it's better.
Yeah, it's a
You
more
know, I'm
complete.
glad we're
yeah.
not as far south as we had been.
We
I agree that Bear Creek is a better choice than Wilson. I really like getting folks to that Columbia River crossing
Mhm.
instead of Colorado Bridge or
Mhm.
Newport Bridge. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
think this looks good.
Parks will be on board for the wayfinding.
yeah.
We had conversation with Parks about
Yeah,
their
yeah.
elements.
Yep.
being part of
Yeah,
this.
Henry Stroud, he wasn't able to be here today, but yeah, we've had some really good conversations. And I know Janet has had those same conversations from a wayfinding standpoint. So yeah, I don't think they have any opposition to us taking advantage of an existing system. That's there.
And that's what we wanted, as the engineering team really started going through the refinement. That's why we felt like, okay, it's probably it's one more visit back to this subcommittee to make sure, because we are changing what we previously told you, and we wanted to make sure you're aware of it and it made sense. So,
And I just wanted to highlight something too. I know Counselor Campbell has mentioned Wilson a couple times, and I know these purple lines on here, these are particularly hard to see. I know everything on here is a little tricky to see, but these purple lines are what the current wayfinding project is looking to sign, and that does include the Wilson Avenue corridor as their east to west route.
Sure. Thank you.
So wait, but are you saying we're not gonna do the wayfinding exactly of the same line that we just talked about?
We will eventually,
will.
yeah. But I think in the near term, we're trying to wayfind some other systems. And then as we build these stretches we just went over, they will get wayfinded as a part of that.
Yeah.
project as well.
we're just telling you, we're gonna continue to build on the wayfinding system, which is going to connect. As we build out these segments, we'll be adding the wayfinding elements. But also we're gonna add wayfinding elements on Wilson and these other kind of not, I wouldn't call them secondary, but kind of like, we've got the main north, south, east, west that we're gonna clearly define. And then and we're working with the wayfinding people to figure out, do we want to say, is it a system? Or are we saying, if you want to get to the old mill, if you want to get downtown, if you want to get to Juniper, if you want to get to Pilot Butte, that's what the wayfinding exercise is doing. And we can just keep building on that as we build out segments of the system.
So I know in the last time we talked about wayfinding something before we were done with the key routes, which is basically what you're describing right now.
Well, yeah, because we want to get some things out there now, right? Because this system is not going to be built in an entirety.
It's gonna take a couple years.
It's going to take a couple of years. So, I just want council to know is like, we're going to get wayfinding on the ground as quickly and as effectively as we can. We just don't want to wayfind to an area that is not ready for it for the project.
Yeah, I just don't, I could maybe, I'm sure I'd get a lot of opposition about this. I just don't know about wayfinding anything other than
these two that we're talking about.
So that may be something we can, because
Yeah.
I'm,
We've already got the contract going on wayfinding, so I
Yeah.
don't mess that. But I'm just saying like, and maybe use it as a pilot for like, does the wayfinding?
That
work?
was the idea,
Test some of
yeah.
the things that
right.
Councilor Campbell's worried about with, choosing the direct line, but
But there are some areas, and that's why I think we're still working with the wayfinding, like how are we defining the system, right? Because we may want to say, look, we can work with them to say, because destinations always work great. Like you want to go to Pilot Butte, you want to go to downtown, you want to go to the old mill, we can destination ways that way too. But if it is really critical to say, these are our main north, south, east, west routes, and we might use, I'm gonna hypothetically say like a coloring system to say, here's the green route and the blue route, right? And you know that that's the safe system, but also if you're just riding around town, you want to get to these different areas, the wayfinding can tell you how to get there.
So you're gonna pull, we're not gonna pull whatever wayfinding we do, the early wayfinding, we're not gonna pull that when we finish. the
No.
project.
No, it's a complete system for the entire city that we're trying to build.
So you have to figure out like whether people come to rely on that as the east-west route, and then we have to re-educate them.
Yeah.
Get into.
Well, and I think that's kind of those are great questions, because from what I'm hearing, like if council would like us to, we can make sure it's like, well, let's make sure we've clearly defined a system on the north, south, east, west that is very recognizable, that, you know, and then look after that of how do we get people to all these different destinations that we're trying to, as we build out the network as well. Which I kind of agree with you, Councilor Broadman, of like, we might be worthwhile to say, again, if I'm going to direct my kids somewhere, it's like, just ride the blue trail all the way to where you need to go. Right.
Yeah. So, but with wayfinding though, we're not gonna be, like, we're not gonna come, this early wayfinding, which again, I think is moving forward. I don't want to mess with it. That's not taking away resources from wayfinding of the more.
No.
permanent.
No,
They're just trying to get something, because it's gonna take us some time, you know, to build the Franklin underpass, to build Bear Creek.
Yeah.
You know, we're gonna be here 2 years from now saying it's done and it's been wayfinding.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, you know, what can we do to help people today?
and the system will work holistically when it's done.
And Wilson's a good example, because, you know, we're gonna get Wilson done and built. Robin and Janet are working to find some funding that's gonna build, you know, kind of make Second Street and feel like an extension of Wilson. And then we've got capital projects on Ani and Third and Miller. I mean, it's all gonna tie together eventually, but in the meantime, we can do stuff sooner than waiting for 2 full years for the rest of us to build.
Got it.
Okay. We ready to move north-south?
That was the easy one.
We hit a lot of the same themes though, so this is good. And you'll see the same.
Warming you up, Barb.
as
Warming
we
you up.
get through here. So we're gonna start on the south end of town just because it's already a really well built out system. You've either seen pictures or been down there yourself probably. So the combination of development work from Caldera High School, Alpenglow Park, our Murphy Bridge project, it's built an off-road system all the way from Knott Road, basically up to just about north of the canal. So it's a great system out there. I live in that end of town. I feel totally comfortable, you know, letting my kids ride around and get over to the park and the school. So we don't think we need to do anything to that system south of the canal. Our first kind of decision point that we evaluated was really when you get a little bit further north on 15th. We've got in the key route project here identified, you know, project 1 or R1D, which is $1.185 million. It says 15th Street from Reed Market south to King Hezekiah, or basically the canal. It says to build a shared use path adjacent to the roadway and convert an existing curb tight sidewalk to a separated shared use path. So once you get up here, we have an older sidewalk. It's only 5 feet wide, it's curb tight, and we have a single stripe on the bike lane. So it doesn't meet our level of stress 1 or 2.
This is 15th Street we're talking about.
North of
That's the
canal.
yellow.
That's the
And
yellow.
and the red is Canal Trail there?
Red
You're
is
gonna
the
tell me
canal
that in a
trail.
second. Okay,
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's where this decision point is.
okay.
There's a connected system on 15th today. We can go spend the $1.2 million and turn it from a 5 foot wide curb tight sidewalk to a separated path. We believe we have got the right of way to do that. So we can pull it away from the roadway. And that would be a perfectly fine solution that would meet a level of stress too. The lowest level of stress though, that we would probably all say is better is to use the canal trail. We don't control the canal trail. So this kind of gets back to a council decision point of, would you consider that stretch of 15th okay? Or, and for now, knowing that we want us to go engage the Nottingham neighborhood and start talking about, you know, dedication or potentially purchasing right of way, or heaven forbid condemnation if we wanted to go that route.
It's HOA maintained right now?
It is, yeah. And so there's been lots of conversations with the neighborhood over the years. They've never shown a lot of interest in inviting people to walk through their neighborhood. That's fine. People still do it all the time. So that's the lowest stress option, getting people onto that trail. And then it comes to an interesting point. So we can deliver 15th in the next 2 years. That's no problem. We've got funding. We can do that. But the ultimate solution, kind of like the future solution is the Hawthorne Bridge, would probably be to go pursue the Canal Trail connection. So we can do either one. What's interesting is that these get you to a different point on Reed Market. So before I ask for any type of decision on what you might want to do there, let's talk about the next phase, which is north of Reed Market, because whichever one of these alternatives you like best might kind of lean to what the solution would be south of Reed Market. So right now, in the maps and in the funding options here, Route 1 would have us go up 15th Street. It's basically the yellow. Up 15th, you take a left at 15th and Reed. We built a super wide sidewalk on the south side of Reed Market many, many years ago. So it already meets our low level of stress. Then you take that over to 9th Street, and then you go north up 9th Street till you get to the 9th and Wilson roundabout. And then, we rode that with you, Councilor Broadman, and you're in the industrial area on 9th Street. The funny part is that stretch of 9th Street, R1B, the TSP said we need $3,000.
What do we do with
Basically, throw some
$3,000?
paint on it.
That's like one wayfinding
Yeah,
sign, yeah.
So in looking at how we want to basically get from Reed Market to Bear Creek, which as a reminder is the east-west connection, what we think might be the better solution is to keep moving people north on 15th rather than pushing them over to 9th Street.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that area on Reed Market between 9th and 15th is not very long. It's about a 30-second ride. So it's a little bit out of your direction, depending on where you want to go. But whether you're sitting at 9th and Reed or 15th and Reed, we believe the easiest way to get to the Coiner Trail, which again is tied into the east-west route, is to continue north on 15th. So we've got the Wildflower Master Plan development that's going to build a separated path on the east side, not along that whole stretch, but it's going to build a good portion of it through there. And then once you get to 15th and Wilson, where we just opened that new roundabout, you can actually hit the Coiner Trail right there. And now you're in the park and you're separated from all the traffic and all the vehicles. So you're through Ponderosa Park, you're past all the ball fields there. And then you can actually follow the Coiner Trail all the way up to near the Franklin roundabout that we were talking about not very long ago.
And
So-
that's pink?
That
No.
is, yeah, just turn
It's
them
not
off
on there.
except the recommended route. So yeah,
Okay.
taking advantage of there you go. So this is both of them overlaid over the top of one another. If we stayed on 15th to 15th and Wilson, then you hit that Coiner Trail, if you want to zoom in a little bit at 15th and Wilson down there. And then you can see we're going cross country now. We're starting to hit that diagonal. So now you're in the park. You can take that all the way past Bear Creek Elementary School, and then that hits Bear Creek. And that intersection of the Coiner Trail and Bear Creek is now when we're in that joint section of both routes at the same time. And again, that's existing infrastructure that's there today. We could always look to enhance it if needed. But that's really the cross point here of both of these routes, ultimately getting you past Bend High and up to the Juniper Park area, which is the heart of a lot of this. So let me pause there and we can go back and have any kind of discussion we'd like to. What we're recommending is that we continue building up 15th.
Up to basically Wilson, right?
Yeah.
And then,
we take advantage of the Coiner
Yeah.
Trail from there.
we'll stop there. What does council think about that proposal?
I think 15th is better than 9th. 9th is too wide and straight. Unless we want to do some sort of almost road dieting to it
To make
to,
an impact,
Yeah.
we would look at reducing the turn lane or doing something
right.
to build a
Yeah.
true system.
But even if we did that, it's industrial. There are just so many big trucks, so many contractors.
And all with
that-
$3,000.
Yeah, so the other part of it is funding, because we looked at like 9th Street is still on the TSP, that road needs to get reconstructed,
Of course,
right? And that
yeah.
could be in that, like the subsequent funding
Right,
package that
none
would
of
come.
What we're talking is
Is
preventing work from being done anywhere.
just, we're
It's
looking at in the next,
just-
what can we get on the ground now with the money that
Right.
we have available?
So, in my humble opinion, yes, 15th is better than 9th. We have been looking at that canal trail for a long time. And I would describe the opposition as more than they're not interested in having people in their neighborhood. I would say it's more than not interested. And that's a puzzle to work out. And eventually we will work it out and it will be there and it will be entirely low stress and that will be great for everyone. But yeah, do we actually want to divert people off of 15th onto what is a potential route that has this problem? That's just going to mean now we're jogging them back over to 15th on
Right.
Reed. I think maybe for today, the answer might be just keep them on 15th.
The other advantage, if we do use 15th, is then we can also, on a tertiary, we can get them on the Larkspur if someone wants to use the Larkspur Trail, because you do have that connection, I think, right at 15th and Reed, everything kind of comes together.
Yeah, that 10-foot wide stretch on Reed is the Larkspur Trail going east-west. So
Yeah.
You can now catch that and that'll get you up towards Pilot View and you can work your way over to the hospital, wherever you might want to go up there.
So
So
that's what we're
what
looking
I
at.
think, but I would always defer to the notorious Broadman and Mendez who actually get around this city on bicycles. I'm serious.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that we have staff that have literally ridden these routes over and over again, a whole lot of time actually on the ground, figuring this out. And I just have to.
We were doing,
you know,
we were
step
doing
back.
staff surveys as well, because we have staff that's coming
I
in from
know,
all different
we
areas
have
of
a
town. It's like,
lot
how
of
would you ride here?
And
Right?
it's not me. So, yeah, for me, 15th is better than the 9th, but Notorious Broadman, what do you think?
I mean, I love the name. I just don't know. I mean, I like.
I know,
don't
either
know.
one would work.
I mean, I know the mayor used to live on this street I think on Hezekiah, and then, so
Mhm.
I don't want to slow anything down, but
Right.
I kind of, that you may need to do a few more questions. I'm not saying like a council meeting, but maybe some more staff and
About the canal trip?
I
you
just,
Yeah,
or
just-
just the whole, like,
So
the whole idea of that. It's just a small stretch and it might be worth getting some more input from staff.
what we could do, and again, this is kind of one of those decision points, is if you don't want us to spend that $1.2 million
Right.
on 15th, we can, there's this complete sidewalk on the east side today. We actually built a partially separated on the west side, or excuse me, on the west side, there exists the 5-foot curb tight sidewalk today. It's not a level of stress 1 or 2. On the east side, we just recently built a sewer line up 15th, and we put some separated as much as we could. It meanders. So there's a pretty decent sidewalk system on the west or east side of 15th as well. There's still some gaps as you get closer to the canal, but
Yeah.
that's kind of like, do we invest $1 million right there today, knowing we're all hoping that it would be the canal trail? Or do we use that million somewhere else in the
Right.
meantime? Maybe to help build some other stretch. So this would be a big piece of Kevin's contract, is are we building this stretch of 15th? Or are we gonna say, you know what, we're comfortable with what it looks like today. Let's pursue the Nottingham Canal Trail, even if it takes a few years.
So can we kind of talk about it into two different
Sure. Yeah.
geographies? So can we just talk about from 15th, the corresponding to the canal trail south, basically?
Mhm.
How do you, what's your feeling on that right now? I know, and I kind of don't even want to mention the canal trail because let's just not talk about whether or not we're going to pursue the canal trail.
Okay.
And just talk about what you would do on 15th right now, given what you know right now about the canal trail. What would you do on 15th south?
Of Reed Market.
Between Reed Market, it's basically between Reed Market and the canal. That's the question.
Would you spend the money on 15th, which I've ridden that. it's not the worst. There's not a
Right.
lot there.
Yeah.
But a child or an elder alone is probably not gonna ride it.
Yeah.
They're probably gonna be on the sidewalk.
It's not a level of stress too. It's a single stripe bike lane and a 5-foot curb type sidewalk. So it's,
So if we were to make improvements on 15th on this stretch, is that something we're discussing? Is that
yeah, if
considered?
we invested that 1.2 on
Okay,
15.
what would that look like?
1 or 2. So
Would that be separated multi-use path or would that?
yeah, so on the west side, we need to build some retaining walls, which is why this is expensive. It might even be more than 1.2. We would tear out the existing 5-foot curb type sidewalk, put like some type of landscaping strip or buffer in there and build a shared use path, an 8 or 10-foot wide path, all within the right of way. I don't think we need any right of way to do this. We've got enough right of way, but it would be completely tearing out the existing system and putting in.
Are you going to drop Evan? Yeah, here we go.
Oh, yeah, let's.
We call the Google person you drop, we call him Evan.
Yeah. So yeah, this is looking, are we looking north?
Yeah, looking north.
So yeah, you can see the, on that one side, there's no sidewalk, but it picks up and on the west side there, which is to the left, you can see it's 5-foot curb type sidewalk. There's some decent slopes. You can, if you pause there, you can see the fence line drops down. So it's 5-foot tall retaining walls and an asphalt or some type of shared use path on top of that.
But I think, Ryan, the only thing we'd be able to do on that corridor, and it's still going to be close, is that multi-use path. We would not be fixing the roadway. We would not be putting buffered bike lanes. It's just, the goal would be get a multi-use path on that west side. So basically between Knott Road and Reed Market, you would have an off-road multi-use path that entire stretch, correct, Ryan? On the west side of the road, I think. Yeah.
And that would essentially mirror the canal trail. That's the stretch we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly that same spot of, instead of being on the canal trail, you just stay on this path. And that would get you up to the 15th and Reed Market roundabout, which is gonna get double laned, and we're gonna put in the flashing beacons on the crossings. That's all part of our future Reed Market work with the GO.
I would like to know about ripping out what's there. Is the ripping out what's there part necessary? Is there no way to just widen what's there? And it wouldn't be perfect. It would be a curb tight multi-use path, which no, we've never done. We have always fully separated our multi-use.
Paths.
Right.
We have limited right of way and.
Yeah.
I mean, just that ripping out part sounds to me like a part of that 1.2 million for the sake of the very best type of multi-use path, which I think we all agree is entirely separated.
We could
but-
save money if we went curb tight.
If we
Right.
just went curb tight and just widen it,
I think you're gonna need to tear out the existing sidewalk.
even to do that,
Yeah.
there's not a way to just make
Yeah.
If
it.
we start excavating next to that. it's gonna
Right.
start crumbling.
And just from a user standpoint, you either want to go like all concrete or all asphalt.
Oh, so the new one would be asphalt instead of
Oh, yeah.
concrete. Got it. Yeah,
'Cause
okay.
It's clear designation to the riders, what's the users of what you're doing on that system.
Mhm.
It can be curb tight though. I mean, that could save us from height of retaining walls. and,
Right.
A little bit of room. And then we can decide if we want it to be 8 feet wide. Again, that might save a little money. We prefer it to be 10 feet.
Mhm.
But if we want to go curb tight 8 feet,
Mhm.
that'd be a lot more financially manageable. So.
Because I guess what I'm hearing from you, Ryan, it's that retaining wall, that's going to be the big cost of that project,
the
right?
Further outside we go, the further. the
Right.
More expensive it's gonna get.
Do you have a recommendation right now?
So I personally, I would not recommend spending $1 million on 15th Street.
Okay.
I think, again, it doesn't meet our level of stress 1 or 2,
Right.
but I live in the bridges down there. I see people using that all the time. Maybe not everybody and maybe not to the comfort level we would desire. But I personally don't believe in investing $1 million there when we, maybe, I know that's a stretch, but maybe we can, if there's been enough people that have changed over in the HOA or, maybe you never know where the conversation could be a year from now or 2 years from now. And the canal trail is the low stress system we would all prefer.
Right.
So let's kind of pause there because there are some critical questions for council here, right? If you want to deliver on the goal of a completed system, then we would say, build that connection on 15th. That'll get you a completed system in the 2-year timeframe. That's the easiest way to put it. If you don't build it now, then what we're kind of saying is, well, then we are preferring to go the canal trail route, but we don't know what that Pandora's box may hold, right? There's other options where we could try to pursue that and hold that $1 million and not, we can move that $1 million to another spot. But if you want to get that of the goal of getting a complete system that is connected, then this would be a gap in the system because we are just using 5-6 foot sidewalks beside the road. And I think that's the main question we want to ask.
Are we okay with the level of stress 3?
Yeah.
As a part of our primary north-south system.
Have gaps there too with the Reed Market overcrossing and that North 9th Street section too.
Yeah. Oh, to the north. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, the other thing is if you look at, you use the canal trail, then you're kind of pushing the whole system to 9th Street. Right. And we're going to have once the Reed Market Bridge goes over, we're going to have an undercrossing there. So it'll be a clear path through. But again, 9th from Reed to Wilson is not great. And we don't have the money there either to complete the whole system.
Well, and we're gonna have a trail, we're gonna have something better at Wildflower that'll get people to the
Yeah.
skate park, right?
Yes. Yeah. So that's why we're looking more like if you want to get something done in 2 years and complete system, 15th is your corridor. That's as basic as I can say it, right?
So do we have, let's talk about the southern portion first. I know it will push people to 9th, but do we have consensus on putting a pin in 15th for now? And basically, I think Ryan's recommendation is correct, that it may not be the best use of resources to do,
To improve that section of 15,
yeah.
when we know we have a better alternative that just needs some time and work. Literally.
And we can hold that money if you wanted to, right?
It's still in the GeoMod, it's still in the TSP. We can just,
And
we won't include it in Kevin's scope of work.
Yeah.
basically.
Are you good with that, Megan?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I really like that canal connection. I just like,
Right,
I
right.
think of when we talk about kids and, other, elderly riding that feels a lot better.
so, I mean, hypothetically, right, let's say we can figure out the canal system, right? And I think we can start to explore that and see what that would mean over the next couple of years. Then would you still want the key route? Let's say we can build it, right? We move the money over to the canal. We use the money that we have on 15th and build the canal. Then we would still bring at Reed Market, we would still bring everybody back to 15th Street and go up 15th Street.
I think that's what you want to do because of we're getting a community investment in front of Wildflower. It takes you to, 9th is
Yeah.
rideable. Did we put Sharrows on 9th like 2 years ago?
No.
No.
Nothing on that.
No.
What am I thinking of? Was there a greenway or something?
There's some greenways around the high school. But again, that's why we really like the Coiner. That's why we kept going back to 15th because we got Wildflower and we've got a good separated park trail system in there that avoids that trouble section of 9th right now until we figure out in the future what we're
There
going
was
to
a
do.
key route or some like Kiwanis Park project that goes down to Reed Market. Am I misremembering that? Isn't there something between Kiwanis and Reed Market? Some elements that prior council built?
Trying to
Or
remember.
was there, maybe it was just a Kiwanis Park project?
There was definitely work by the park.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember.
But that was more in the neighborhoods, right?
Down Centennial or.
But I think that was on the other side of the
It
rail.
was a safe street. That's what it was. It was a safe street.
Was it? Okay.
It was
Yeah.
like a COVID street.
Oh, yeah. it might have been something.
Yeah. I just don't think we're going to avoid I think we either need to be on 15th or 9th.
Yeah.
It's to get us from basically kind of the canal up to Bear Creek.
Well, and both of them cross Wilson, right?
Right.
They're gonna be on this nice east-west Wilson sub.
Correct.
What is that length from 9th to 15th? Like what, roughly? How far out of the way is it?
This one?
Oh,
600 feet.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's no time at all. It's
Yeah.
not that far
Yeah.
out of direction. Yeah. And when we built the previous Reed Market project, we, parked so that, hey, that's the Larkspur Trail. Can you put in a 10-foot wide sidewalk through there? Sure. So it's built today. It's ready.
Okay, so then you get to the roundabout at Reed Market and 15th. and you're basically at Larkspur right there.
Yes,
So Larkspur is money going to.
Larkspur is the
east.
green.
And
you
then,
see.
but what do you, how, if you're gonna go up 15th between basically Reed Market and Bronzewood before we get to the new, is that where the new Wildflower will start?
Yes.
Yes, at Bronzewood.
So there's frontage in front of the new Larkspur Center, Larkspur Park, that is already a low level of stress.
Yeah.
Once you cross their driveway, then it comes back to being a curb tight sidewalk. So we would do something in that stretch that ties into Wildflower near Bronzewood there. And then you're on the Wildflower portion of it till you get up to 15th and Wilson.
And we would basically kind of use the existing sidewalk system there in the interim while we wait for, because I don't have a definitive timeline on Wildflower now, but we'd be saying we want that development because they're required to build that.
When you get to Wilson and you cross into the park.
Yep.
And then you're on the corner strip.
Yeah. Okay.
And that, yeah, and you stay on that park corner trail connection until you get to the intersection with the east-west route.
Garrett?
I'll throw out a crazy idea here. If you're talking about going up the canal trail, and right now our bond project is 9th Street, we just built Wilson, instead of going over on Reed Market and then having to build up 15th and then figuring out how to fund 9th in the future, we could continue up 9th and build that bond project and connect to Wilson and go over to the trail at 15th and Wilson too. So then we don't have to find future funding for that bond project stuff or that TSP. So.
And Garrett, just for clarification, what is 9th going to look like between Wilson and Reed Market with the bond project?
Right now, what we're thinking it would be is a shared use path on the west side of the street.
Oh.
And there'd be a little bit of a pinch point when you get to the 9th and Wilson roundabout, just because of that PP&L property on the southwest corner. But that could connect over to those protected lanes on Wilson. And it'd honestly probably be better too, because we're probably going to widen 15th Street before we do the Reed Market overcrossing. Then you're going to have a multi-lane roundabout that we're
Gone through,
crossing
yeah.
this trail.
Okay, so you assume you're at the spot on Reed Market where the canal trail comes out. You cross there, you cross Reed Market onto 9th.
We'd have to take them on that sidewalk on the south side
Mhm.
and then cross at 9th. So we might need to look at
Okay.
some sort of treatment.
Yeah, so we've got it pulled up here, right? So that would either be that crossing there, and then when the bridge gets built, there'd be a tunnel basically underneath Reed Market, right? And then we'd be putting people most likely on the east side of Wilson or 9th, I'm sorry, or we don't know yet, Garrett, on
You
which,
said
Yeah,
west
it's
side.
the west.
the west side, okay.
Is there room between the road and the railroad tracks there?
Yeah, it looks like.
Yeah, we got it up.
And it avoids, again, we're in the industrial area here, so you have a lot of big trucks, train
Right,
movements,
yeah.
driveways that are well old and well beyond our standards. So if we can stay to the west, it
Yeah.
avoids.
Can you,
all of those
can you drop Evan on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea, Gary. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do we take advantage of the future tunnel on Reed Market to go north up 9th and then you're on Wilson? And then from there, we would bring them, you could go west toward the mill, or you could go east back to.
Back
the
to
Corner Trail.
15
So-
and the Coiner Trail.
and Garrett, walk with me here. 9th Street is currently basically a county road standard, no curbs, right? And that entire section.
Is there
Yeah.
really room between there and the railroad?
So again, I'm gonna go back to framing the question. It's your kid, right? You're
Yeah.
telling your kid where to go.
Yeah.
They would basically be riding between 9th Street and the rail, going down this corridor. Or do we want to put them up on 15th? And also think of destinations too, is how important is getting people to Larkspur in the conversation as well. Is that something we should be considering in kind of in the main routes? Because we're connecting people to Juniper. We're connecting people to Alpenglow, right? And you'll see up as we go to the north, Ryan's going to tell you where we're connecting up there, which is, we're looking at the big parks up there. So again, that's why we wanted to come here and make sure, as you can tell, we've been wrestling with this in the room back here for weeks. We really want, and I don't think Garrett's got a bad idea here of, because in theory, you don't have a lot of side street conflicts on that route. You're just kind of running between the rail and a kind of a county level road.
So you're talking about in between the existing right of way and the railroad. That's where it would go in.
Yeah, right through those trees through there.
Is the railroad, are the tracks fenced right there?
No,
Yeah.
see,
Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
That is what the map tells us to build today, is to build up that street.
Right.
I mean, Ninth Street needs work. That
The whole
section
thing needs
is
to be, yeah,
terrible.
yeah.
It just is not acceptable for anybody right now. And I absolutely do see people on their bikes getting through there, just on the edge of the road. Oh, you guys, I don't know.
That's why, I mean, there's not a wrong answer here, right? That's why we wanted to present it to
No,
council
and-
to see.
and This one would be because of that future underpass under Reed Market.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we eventually take advantage
It's
of the canal
remembering-
trail, then you're basically on Ninth already. and then
Uh-huh.
You go
You
through a
don't
nice,
have to
beautiful
get
tunnel.
across Reed Market on one of
So-
those roundabouts.
So the other thing I want to point out to you, another thing to think about is your out of direction travel. Because if we still say we want to get people back to the corner trail,
Right.
it is shorter on Reed Market than it is on Wilson, the out of direction travel. So look at the distance on Reed Market between 9th and 15th
Mhm.
there, and then go up to Wilson.
Right.
It is probably more than double the distance. Because once we get people on 9th, they're more likely to stay on 9th, and we're going to get into the harder area is that from Wilson up to Bear Creek,
I agree.
right? So
Yes.
again, that's why this has probably been the area we've been talking about the most of how do we want to move people between Reed Market and Bear Creek, north, south?
So I mean, I think we gotta just default to, I love the idea of using the tunnel, the Ninth Tunnel, but I think we gotta default to parks and schools. And I think probably the safer park school choice is that more easterly route.
I would tend to agree with you.
And then, as much as I like the idea of the tunnel, tying into the tunnel, and also like it goes right to the new roundabout, protected roundabout.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's not bad.
No, it's like kind of, we have a bike protected roundabout that
Yeah.
And
we,
we're,
south from there, it's not great.
Yeah.
and Garrett, we're still going to build that section of 9th between Wilson and Reed with the bond projects, correct?
No, this, going up 15th Street would take that bond money.
Oh,
to 15th
Okay,
Street.
that's
So
important.
then it would have to be funded. out of
Thank
labor
you. Yeah.
Point, or we have to find experience savings in the bond to reallocate.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
So there's also something about orphaning this southerly route off of a protected
Yeah.
bike roundabout, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably beyond this, well, T-Bach has to, that's a bond project, right? Between, yeah.
So, and again, we got to worry about, kind of what we said we're going to do where and there, but it's really more of what are we trying to do with the project? And then we'll figure out what needs to happen behind the scenes. And if we need to change something and go talk to T-Bach and things like that. But it's really, we're just trying to define what, from a value standpoint, what corridor do we think is better to go after here?
I mean, I don't, despite the protected roundabout, I don't see how we don't connect Larkspur to the skate park.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. We just wanted to make sure that, because we've been really focused on 9th Street before and trying to do whatever we could there. And this option came up and it's like, no, well, it may tick some other boxes in what we're doing.
So we can continue north, or I don't know if we want to discuss this further or kind of give a council recommendation on
So
here.
here's one other question. So let's assume you get to the pool, you get to the Larkspur Senior Center.
Yep.
You go up the trail. This is roundabout. This is not a direct route, but you go up the Larkspur Trail.
Which is the blue.
Yeah, and then aren't we working on a project on Tempest, or Tempest is not a busy street. If you crossed over directly to the park from,
Yeah,
that's done. I mean, you can do that right now.
well, and one of the wildflower conditions, and correctly, I'm pretty sure they're gonna connect Larkspur through their,
No, they're not all the way. They're going to get to their boundary.
okay.
And then there's discussions with the parks of trying to connect. Yeah. So the wildflower is not required to make that connection inside the park district property.
Okay, but yeah, it crosses Tempest today, you're right. And actually, I think that's where I've got a slide when we.
That's the race crossing question.
Race crossings. You could take Tempest over to Ponderosa Park, but there, I don't think there's a safe
There's no kind of
crossing. Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah,
All of that connection's already built between the Larkspur development and the Reed Market.
Yeah.
Work that Ryan referenced to.
Yeah. Because we could also say it's the Larkspur Trail up to Bear Creek, right?
You would save so much money by using just the Larkspur Trail.
you would, and it'd be a lower stress system.
It's out of direction travel, right? But again, trying to figure out who we're trying to serve
Just a
here,
little bit east,
just that little bit east.
which is along Reed Market. Is that Reed Market or is that?
Reed Market's to the south, Bear Creek is to the north. So if you look here, Barb.
Yeah,
this is-
right there.
This is Reed, right?
Right, yeah.
Larkspur's here. Here's Bear Creek. This is the Larkspur Trail.
Yep,
Which is, and then 15th, and then the corner trail hits here and goes on the diagonal, right? So we could say the north-south is get to Reed Market 15th, go by Larkspur, take Larkspur up to connect to the Bear Creek east-west, and then you're on the east-west system.
oh my God, me too.
So how much will that save us?
Well, it would basically mean, to Garrett's point, we don't need to reallocate the 9th Street funding.
And we can go build 9th.
And we can take advantage of building that in the future in conjunction with the Reed Market Bridge and the tunnel. Just point people to Larkspur for now.
And then 15th would basically stay in its existing condition with the improvements going on at Wildflower.
Yeah, with the wildflower improvements.
Yeah.
And even the frontage of 15th from the Larkspur Center, I mean, that looks pretty good, right there.
It's basically- You got a block here that in theory,
Yeah.
we would have, at some point, we could try to find other funding and clean that up later.
I've seen, the panels buckled over the years from tree roots, and our ops guys come out and level it out. So it's a connected system. It's just not a one or two from a level of stress.
So, okay, so you want to get from Larkspur Center to Ponderosa. You will go through Wildflower.
If you want to get from, sorry, say that question again.
So like right now you're at the Larkspur Center, you
Yep.
get on the Larkspur Trail and you want to hit the new roundabout at the skate park.
Then I think we would need to go talk to the park district because we know what Wildflower is going to build. There is a gap and we need to figure out how to connect to basically to the eastern or the eastern edge of Wildflower.
Yeah.
And we could work with the park district.
That wouldn't be hard.
That wouldn't be hard, no. And I think everyone's on board of trying to make that connection from all the conversations I'm aware of.
I mean, Wildflower is going to want to tie the Larkspur.
Yeah, they're just not required to do it. So either the parks or the city would have to make that short. I mean, it's probably a couple hundred feet at the most, right? I don't think it's that big. So again, let's kind of reframe this. So there's basically 3 options, what I'm hearing. One, we push people to 9th. We've got a project, we can build a bike lane or a path from Reed Market to Bear Creek. We can improve the 15th corridor between Reed Market and Wilson and get everybody to the corner, or we can push people over to the Larkspur. And then that would connect them up to Bear Creek and also work for that midpoint connection. Or we can say, no, we really want to get people through the Wildflower development over to the corner.
They can choose it.
They can choose, yeah. Yeah.
I like Larkspur.
And go to the hospital.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm most comfortable, I think, with that. The
Yeah.
Larkspur option is, it seems like there's gonna need to be some ancillary projects to make it
Yeah.
work. And now
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why, for the sake of argument, the Frankenstein is the Frankenstein, right? We want to make sure what elements, because we can put that as part of the project of, let's go make sure we can make that connection to Wildflower with the park district as part of that project.
We're not gonna find you in the cemetery digging up for body
No.
parts, are we?
No,
Building your Frankenstein's
cemetery's
monster.
too expensive.
Yes.
I know,
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
We
we
will-
already
we will
have to
stay.
man up for the cemetery.
Guys, we-
No
Potentially-
building Frankensteins.
So am I hearing Larkspur is kind of the preferred option that we should be looking at?
Unless there's some sort of uproar from fellow counselors when they hear about this, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah,
I think there's something we're missing. I mean,
okay, so that would mean,
staff, I mean, if staff like thinks about it. and
Yeah.
then It's like,
And
this
then
isn't gonna
says-
work.
Actually,
Isn't that
that's
right?
the most fiscally responsible thing to do, because we're not
Exactly.
investing on 15th. We're not moving money away from the 9th, which we're supposed to do.
Exactly.
And so.
yeah,
It offers that, safety.
right. It's just, we just want to make sure everyone's okay with it. It's a little bit out of the way travel, but it is safe, right? The safety factor. So,
I think that's the whole point of
so if we're
this.
doing that, then let's go real quick to the raised
Yes.
median, because this is the perfect, and I'm gonna watch the time because we still have a couple more decisions on the north, but this is the heavy one right here. Just so you know, Barb, you're on.
You know that some presidents have all the same color suit, just because a human being can only make a certain number of decisions in a single week. I hit my limit Tuesday night at 9:20.
I know, and you did great. I will tell you, you're on the downhill slide. You're on the downhill slope of this. Gravity's gonna help you. Gravity's gonna help you here.
I'm
And in the
gonna
meeting, you have
close
to
my
choose-
eyes and reach into the refrigerator for
choose
dinner.
A
'cause I-
couple species of trees at the end of the day.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay,
And then your decisions are done for the week.
so let's go to the raised median discussion real fast, because it came up during wildflower discussions and we said we'd bring it back to council to talk about it. So real quick, Ryan, kind of talk through what the options are here.
So I gave you each a packet real quick for your reading pleasure. And so I'll go through this as quickly as I can. Where we are today with, we call them traffic calming devices, but the subject of discussion was raised pedestrian crossings. So our current standards and specifications that we had adopted by council just a year ago in 2022 really kind of redid this whole section for us. Not to say we can't continue to modify it if you so want us to, but where we sit today is, here's an example of a crossing up on the north end of town. This is near the elementary school up there off of Egypt. This is what we consider a raised pedestrian crossing. So historically, the city has really focused on keeping these located near parks and schools. So if the park districts comes to us and said, hey, we're building Caldera High School or whatever elementary school, absolutely, safe route to school concept. Let's make sure the traffic is fully aware that kids are crossing here. So we've really only built these historically on school frontages, park properties, and neighborhood greenways. So that's kind of our standard, the way it sits today. And the reason so is that we've had a lot of requests over the years to do either this or what you would traditionally see, the speed bumps. And they're just not warranted. And I know that's hard for the public to understand sometimes. But just because they think people are going too fast down their road doesn't mean we just should automatically install a speed bump everywhere, because they would be everywhere if we allowed that. So we do need some level of standard in which we determine when to put in these, these crossings and these types of devices. So just to make sure everybody's tracking our current design standards today for installing traffic calming devices, we have a variety, and we'll go through these here real quick. But this is the language in our standards. So things like speed humps, pedestrian crossings, curb extensions, neighborhood traffic circles, all these things are things that we can do. We don't consider roundabout, stop signs, signals. Those are not traffic calming devices. Those are just standard traffic devices. So those don't really calm the traffic at all.
But a mini roundabout or traffic circle
The
is a traffic
circle,
calming.
yes.
Yeah, got
So for example, we've installed traffic circles on the greenways on 6th Street.
Mhm.
Because so that is a traffic calming device.
Yep.
So there's 3 tables in our standards here in which we use to do this. The first table is basically, we can use these anywhere at any time we want, with the exception of local streets, which we've kind of hinted at that already. The industrial, I mean, so the local industrials, we got to be careful about doing some of this because trucks just drive over the curbs and ruin them anyway. So curb extensions are very common. You see these all over town. Adding on-street parking makes it feel like you have a narrower travel lane, and it creates that sense of conflict. So that slows vehicles down. Any type of additional landscaping that we can do using narrower lanes. So that's another standard that council adopt, is we took a lane from 12 down to 11 feet. We did that very recently as well. And then any center line treatments like the traffic circles. So these are, we design and integrate these into the work we do all the time today. Tables 2 and 3 are a little different. This is where it gets interesting. So the criteria for when we do something different, which we've normally focused on greenways, parks, and schools, you can read up above there. but it basically says they need to be a part of the low stress network, which a key route would be. And they have to have an uncontrolled length in excess of 3 blocks, have an ADT of over 400 vehicles. And then we also do a speed study. And you want to see the speed study. To put one of these in, you want to show that the 85th percentile speed is 5 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. So if 85% of the cars are going 32 in a 25 zone, you would meet that criteria. Often what happens when we get requests to do this, we'll go do a speed study and it'll show that the 85th percentile speed is 27 or 28. Of course, people go 35 or 40, but that's an outlier. The average speed actually is within 5 miles an hour of the posted speed. So you don't put in a traffic calming device for the 1 or 2 vehicles that are violating the speeds. So that's kind of our base criteria for when we would install these. That being said, if somebody meets these criterias, we would look at narrowing the travel path with curb extensions or things like that. That's where we would put in speed humps, which we have a design standard drawing for that. And that's included in your packet there. Or we'll look at something like alternating the parking. You've seen this like a Northwest Crossing, where you might force the vehicles to weave a little bit. So you have on-street parking on one side, and then 500 feet up front, you've got it on the other side. And then raised crosswalks, again, if somebody meets all these criterias and you're on a local street, we would certainly look at the option of installing a raised crosswalk.
Is there any actual difference between a speed hump and a raised crosswalk? Raised crosswalk is wider on the flat part at the top.
And it usually has to do with how it integrates into the sidewalk systems.
Oh, okay.
So I got a couple good examples
Thank
from NACTO, which has some good stuff. And that's right after this slide.
Sorry,
So,
thank you.
No, that's a good question. So these are the 2 standard drawings we have today. This is a speed hump, which is drawing R32. That's in your packet. This is where you would just install kind of, it's not a tabletop, but it's
A
not
parabolic
speed
crown.
bump. There you go. Thank
There
you.
you go. Good call.
So we have, standard lengths and widths and, how these things are supposed to function to slow people down. So we have a standard for that today. And then we also have a raised crosswalk standard, and that's what we use. That's standard drawing R33. So these concepts are all very much in line. Tempest, we just talked about that. So here's an example of the Larkspur Trail as it exists today. So right now, it's not a raised crosswalk. It could be. It's curb extensions and narrower lanes, and really just bringing awareness to folks that you're now at a spot where you should expect pedestrians to be. But this is one where if we say that is our key route, it probably makes sense to go install a raised crosswalk right there. So that's something we could certainly do. To reference some of the NACTO concepts, because that's a great resource. I think most of you are familiar with that. They call these things vertical speed control elements. And so they have 3 basic categories. They have speed humps, which is what you're referring to. Typically that allows room on the outside and it doesn't connect. That's basically meant to slow vehicles down. Columbia is a good example of that. Those are speed humps. Then you have speed tables, which is again, primarily meant to slow cars down, but that's where it starts connecting to. So they call them speed tables. We call those raised crosswalks.
Thank you.
It's the
Yeah.
same name, just a different concept. Yeah.
Okay.
Or same concept, different name. So they call them speed tables. We call them raised crosswalks. And that's where the pedestrian doesn't go up or down. The car goes up or down. The pedestrian stays on a level surface. Now, keeping in mind, this comes with other issues, right? So now all of a sudden your drainage might not work the way it used to. You might have pooling of things. You might have, EMS isn't necessarily a big fan of, watching the patient in the back of the ambulance go bump, bump as they go over stuff like this. But they're certainly understanding if we do them in certain areas. And then the last one that NACTO has is speed cushions, which is a completely different concept. This is meant to make the compromise of where like emergency vehicles could, work their way through that without having to be delayed or cause any type of issues. So, but again, that's primarily car oriented, not necessarily pedestrian oriented. So that's basically where we are today.
Can I ask a quick, please?
Please, yeah.
Here it says speed humps are not permitted in accessible routes.
What's an accessible route?
Where are you reading that?
I am. This
In the
page.
text? Oh, on the drawing?
Yeah.
Must mean
I'm
like
on-
getting a wheelchair over it.
What's that?
Maybe getting a wheelchair over it.
Is
Yeah,
that
if-
what that means?
yes. If,
Speed humps are not permitted in accessible routes.
because that's a speed humps, that's what's on Columbia, right? So.
Oh, right, yeah. So the speed humps, which are more of these,
Yeah,
if that's somehow marked as an ADA accessibility route, that a speed hump would not meet ADA compliance.
do we have any
I think
ADA
parking
accessibility?
lot, there could be conflicts in parking lots and things like that.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't worry too much about that
Yeah,
here.
okay. No, it's just, I.
And
know
I-
accessible.
And for the sake of time, because we
Yeah,
got a
it's okay.
couple,
Yep,
couple more,
keep
quick-
going.
I guess the question for council, and Ryan, I'm assuming, is that,
Yeah, that was all I had. Yeah.
the question for council is, do you want to introduce these? Because it really came up on the question of Bronzewood and really Tempest, right? In the discussion now of the key routes, does council have interest in, as Ryan explained, it is something we can do. It is, I think it is permitted. We just don't want the proliferation of them all over town because people, well, because of EMS and that kind of stuff.
Wait,
But we
does
wa-
people really want them? They want them on
Well,
every single
we,
street?
we're just balancing all the different competing needs that we have. So,
Everybody wants.
yeah. So if we do put them in, do we want to have criteria around it needs to be on a key route, or, or on just the main north, south, east, west? Because these are all over town and we're fine doing them. We just want to make sure that engineering and EMS are comfortable. We're putting them and we've got good
How
criteria.
have we
on
been deciding so far? You're right, they're already all over
It-
town.
Well,
What
in the
criteria
last-
is there now?
In the last 10 years, it's the criteria that we have outlined here, where you basically need to meet those criteria.
Uh-huh.
If you can prove that you can do that and you're
Uh-huh.
not near a park, greenway, or
Uh-huh.
school, we'll let you do it.
So if we approved a new criteria, you don't have to do the speed study. We have allowed
We-
them
we-
on key routes, for
If we say
example.
basically,
Got it, okay.
if a key route crosses a local road, because we are not doing these on collectors and arterials,
Yeah. not on-
it's
yeah,
just
not-
in local neighborhood roads.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to have this additional level of kind of, because
And this is always happening.
it provides,
There might be some random one somewhere that is determined by speed study, right?
It-
It's a question of, do we also want to have them outright permitted
yes.
in other
Yeah,
places,
so
right?
we, like,
Okay.
if you're on a park or near a park, greenway or school,
Mhm.
we don't make you meet this criteria.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what are you
So do we
suggesting?
add-
What do you think we
We
should
just
do?
add key routes to being one of those kind of.
Yeah.
Agreed,
I'm
Allowed
definitely
it.
that. Definitely. we should do
right?
that.
Yeah.
Is it an unworkable standard to just say they are legal everywhere with an emphasis because we have finite financial resources of focusing them on key routes?
I would rather say, if you want to have that larger discussion, I would say, I think we agree, like, if a key route crosses a local road, we should definitely be looking at it. If you want to have a larger conversation, I would say, let's pull that to another conversation, because we'd really like to get EMS in the room with
I
this.
think EMS needs to be involved no matter what. I don't think we need to be precious about limiting ourselves. Like,
Me
if there's a
too.
Well, I will just say, we get a large amount of requests for these things. And we do have concerns of just opening it up without some set of criteria. So that's why from a staff perspective, we're always a little cautious, because people will say, I want this here, here, and here, and then it becomes harder to say why we're doing things some places and not others.
Right, which is why I'm suggesting we do it based on financial burdens, because we cannot build them everywhere.
Right?
So, but I also want to give staff the freedom, like, if you say there is an arterial where it makes a ton of sense, and it's right after a traffic light or something, I don't know. And you want to put one in, why should the code prevent you from?
I think we will look at special circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, so the way we work basically is this is a path through. If you meet these criteria here, if it's 400 feet in length and there's other things that I'll factor in,
Right.
we always have the ability to do an exception to our standards. That exists today.
So
So,
I'm going to do this for the sake of time, because we're talking about key routes. If council's interested, if we got where these key routes cross local roads, we can look at adding this into those conversations. That's not a problem. Just for the sake of time, I would like to go back, and we can continue this in standard and specs updates and everything. We can put this on the list let's still talk about this more. But if we could move, I would like to move back to the kind of north-south route, because we got a couple more key decision points in time, if that's acceptable.
so let's say we're now at Bear Creek. We're now kind of working jointly with the east-west route. The next the next stretch though is basically getting people from Bear Creek to safely cross Highway 20 and then eventually further north. So we evaluated 3 different options through here. Furthest east is the Larkspur Trail. Again, that exists today. That takes you around the east side of Pilot Butte. That's where you go past the bowling alley and you go underneath Highway 20, the lowest stress you could possibly get. But there are safe crossing devices that have been installed on Highway 20 at 12th and at 6th Street. We have built both 12th and 6th today to Greenway standards. So we have traffic calming devices, we have sharrows, we have speed
On
humps.
some parts of 12.
On some parts of 12th, yeah, not all of it. 6th is the one we've been focused on a lot in the past
Oh,
today.
yeah.
And that's good grades. It's flat.
And it's exactly.
What people were using before we ever.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, so
thought,
that's why
right?
we capitalized on
No,
6.
that's
So
what bikers
so
figured out.
what staff recommendation is you've got people to Juniper Park here. You've combined with the east-west route. It would make a lot of sense to use 6th Street, keep them moving north, get on that safe crossing. That gets you all the way up to Butler Market. So again, there's a wayfinding element to that to make sure people understand that is the route. But then really the decision point here now is when you come to this intersection of where Butler and Boyd come together. So
Kind of hold, is everyone okay with 6th Street between Butler and basically Juniper is what we're saying, right?
Okay, so say you're in Healy Heights and you're going to school at Juniper. You're crossing at the tunnel, right?
can you
Going around the
Mhm.
Butte. That's how you would get to school. Like if you're on the south side of 20
Mhm,
and you're going to school at Juniper,
mhm.
I would use the tunnel.
Yeah,
what
you'd
you're
probably
suggesting, or
tunnel
would you-
Larkspur
Are you saying
around
that we're gonna
Pilot
take
Butte.
them all the way over?
No, we're still gonna have Larkspur available and we can wayfind it, but we are trying to move people further because the Larkspur kind of peters out at Neff on top of a hill, right? So we will always have that, we will have that marked route. It'll be marked for getting people over there, but for the north-south route, we want to go further than Neff. And that's where 6th Street comes in to get up to Butler Market. We think that's better than 12th and better than.
Does 6 get across now?
There's a safe crossing, median crossing. Yeah. Yeah, because this is Elizabeth's territory of town, so she knows this time very well.
Okay.
So is that, I just want to check in before because there are some key decisions up at Butler. Does that make sense to council? Because Larkspur will still be available. That'll get to Juniper Pilot Butte.
The Rock Campbell Pilot Butte Student Commuter Trail is also available, even though it doesn't quite connect through the state park to the safe crossings on Highway 20. But it gets kids from Juniper School to
And-
the park instead of 12th Street, where the improvements have not been done.
But we're working for connections between Juniper and Pilot Butte. That's all still happening,
Yep,
right?
no,
So
all of that stuff is.
I just
there.
want to back out
You
to,
can Do it. Yep.
we're trying to get people to the north part of town, which is
Yeah.
basically north of Butler Market. We feel 6 is the appropriate way to do this. And it connects into kind of Juniper as that hub, right? Of where those things cross. Okay, keep going then, Ryan.
Yeah, all good questions, though. That's why we took a deep dive into all 3 of these routes in front of us. But yeah, utilizing 6th is probably financially the best thing we could do today. That gets you up to Butler Boyd. So that introduces you into an active project we have today, which is going to build a roundabout at Butler and Wells. And then it's intended to build a key route all the way up Boyd to Empire. And then on Butler, from the Butler Boyd intersection all the way over to Brinson. So bottom line is we can't afford to do all that with the money allocated from the Transportation Construction Fund and the GEO bond. So George and Matt have been working on this. We just closed a community outreach kind of open house virtually, wound up with, how many was it, George? Like 200 plus?
377.
377 comments on the virtual open house, which is great.
That's great.
That's an example of when we did an alternatives analysis on Butler and on Boyd and said, here are the 3 options that you could build. One is a buffered, one is, George, you want to remind me what are the 3? Buffered, separated.
Separated and a bikeway.
And
a cycle track.
kind of
Yeah.
concept, yeah. The bottom line though is that Boyd requires crossing canals. And the canal crossing cost alone is basically unfeasible. So, and with costs the way they are today compared to what the TSP estimated, we're probably going to need to take all that money that wasn't intended for Boyd just to build the portion of Butler that we're supposed to build. Make the intersection at Butler Boyd a little safer, and then build out the key route on Butler Market up to Brinson. So what we're recommending from a staff perspective, as much as, you know, there's a lot of housing up there north of Empire that would be great to connect to, and we do need to build that someday. When you're on Boyd there, it kind of introduces the same thing as Ninth, where you're in an industrial area, you got super wide driveways, Geldwen is constantly backing up across all of that. It's just not a great spot to be able to invest in today. So we're recommending that the key route that's known as the north-south key route follows 6th Street, takes the little chicane there and gets you to the Butler Boyd intersection. And then we believe that the flagged and designated key route should go up Butler. And eventually this is pushing you up to like the parks and the schools that are up there.
Boyd on there, sorry, before.
Oh, it's the intersection of the green and the yellow right
There,
there.
okay,
Yeah,
it's not the red and yellow.
yeah.
There's Butler Boyd,
Mhm.
that other little bit, that's Butler Market.
To the right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right, and then
And then it
that's
starts to
what,
angle.
got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's staff recommendation is
Can
we
you zoom out even further?
call Butler the north-south route that gets you all the way up to Pine Nursery Park. We've recently built some good infrastructure there with some roundabouts and the wide 10-foot wide lanes around the outside. And then even as you go north up Purcell there, we've got, separated sidewalk and buffered bike lanes that exist today.
Canal
So you're
crossing.
in the canal crossing,
Uh-huh.
exactly. We spent a lot of money.
Yeah, we
recently
did.
Doing that canal
Yeah.
crossing. So we think you should take advantage of that.
So in theory, that can, kind of the end destination on the north side through this with the available funding we have is really kind of like Pine Nursery. We're getting people to Pine Nursery.
And then what is that? No, it's,
There's the elementary school out there.
well, where does it dead end? Where's that pink?
Yeoman?
Thank you.
Yeoman.
Yeoman,
And
right.
Yeoman's gonna get connected back to 18th
Uh-huh.
with the, with the, yeah, Petrosa. Then 18th has a bike system on there. It's not to the current, there's probably some improvements in the future that need to be made there, but we can get a good system, basically, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, to Pine Nursery.
Yeah.
Right? And then there are options there to continue north that we may have to come back and supplement in future bonds and future projects. But just now looking at how we can connect the system, we can get, basically from Alpenglow to Pine Nursery
Mhm.
to Discovery Park to Parkside Place.
And I think that makes a lot more sense than east-west or north-south.
Yeah.
What are the actual, that's what I'm familiar with.
And Juniper's,
It's identified by, this is the Juniper Park
yeah.
to Shevlin Park route, or
Yeah.
this is the hospital to something else route.
So that's,
Not just north, whatever.
and we can continue to build in the north. There's kind of secondary systems that can
No,
get
I
you up
agree. I
to,
think those are
but
destinations. There are people are actually trying to go. They'd like to ride their bike to the park sometimes. We spent a fortune on that canal.
Yeah.
yeah.
Very happy about that. Took a long
No,
time to
it's,
get it.
as we started to put these together, and the engineering team has done such a great job of evaluating all these different approaches and kind of,
I really appreciate that. And I
Yeah.
know how much of that time was literally on the ground, on bicycles, not just looking at maps,
Yeah.
saying, well, I don't know if anybody do this. Which
So-
is my level of analysis.
let's just pause here. Any questions on
Okay.
that, on those options?
I mean, just in terms of cutting down car traffic, I think getting people to and from Pine Nursery on Saturdays when it's not covered with snow is pretty, I mean, it's a huge bang for our buck.
Yeah,
think so too.
I agree.
Yeah. Boy, they have soccer tournaments out there.
Yeah,
There's not enough parking in the world for
This
when
is
they have a
another-
soccer
yeah.
tournament.
This is
right?
another example, of kind of the conflict we talked about earlier
Uh-huh.
is if we're not going to use the money as programmed from the bond on
Right.
Boyd, and that doesn't mean we're not going to build Boyd someday.
Right.
But it means we probably need to take that money just to get Butler built the way we want to today. And so it's not deleting any projects. It's just a shifting of the funds a little bit to make sure that we can afford to do
Yep.
this route.
So, because I'm being cognizant of time, I just want to make sure if there are any other questions, and I just kind of want to summarize kind of what we're thinking and then kind of next steps, right? And how we want to do this. So looks like I think we figured out which paths we want to go, north, south, east, west. We're getting to these major destinations. I think we're in pretty safe harbor. I'm looking at Elizabeth I don't think there's any big red flags around funding in the TSP and the bond list and the projects. I think we will verify all that. I think because there are some significant changes from what we previously discussed, I would recommend that we maybe go for a work session. I think we tentatively have something scheduled in July, I think, to come back. What I would recommend is with the help of and assistance of council as Ryan goes through this, is we would just lay out, this is the north, south, east, west. We will not go in through all the minutia of, we had 3 different options. We will just say, this is exactly what we're doing and where, and this is what's going to be built. We can start to work on putting together the RFP in the meantime.
Let Kevin say, okay, here's the scope we need to define for somebody to start designing some of this.
And in between now and then, we'll also verify that we're not missing any big red flags in terms of TBOC, the GeoBond funding, TSP, just make sure that we're all clear and bring all that back to council in a work session. And then we're off and going. And you're going to see contracts and we're building stuff. Is that?
Sounds good.
I think it's appropriate to go back to the full council.
I do, yeah.
I just want to make sure everyone thinks that's
But
appropriate.
I agree. I don't think we need to take them all the way back through. We thought about, well, this was the first map I looked at. Then we
Yeah.
thought, no, I agree. Notorious?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yep.
All right. Well, any other questions or comments or things that you want us to focus on or direction of the team? Because everybody's here.
We're going to take this as enough approval for Kevin to get his contract out on the street to bid.
What is the most, what are the biggest elements that are going to be part of the construction contract? Like what is it?
Yeah, well,
I mean, are we going to see barriers? Are we going to see motor filters? Are we going to see?
it's possible. Yeah. I mean, so that's just like we've done alternatives analysis on Butler Boyd.
Yeah.
And it's kind of said, okay, this is probably what you need to do. Interestingly enough, on that one, the third most liked option was the cycle track. Which, okay, that's interesting, but yeah.
What is a cycle?
That's a completely independent, like on one side of the road, you have both north-south bike traffic.
Oh,
on the
two-way
same
traffic.
system.
Got it.
So,
It's a multi-use
can-
path with a divider in the middle.
So right now, Councilor
That's
Broadman,
only cycles.
yeah,
in our scope of work, what we have today, we do not have the filters like those,
Yeah.
and you're talking just on local, kind of on the greenways, basically on local roads, right? I looked at like Ryan about, we could probably look at it, but I don't
oh,
know.
yeah, I mean, that's always a design option.
Yeah, so if you'd like us to put us in the scope to say, hey, what options are there? When we start looking at those elements, there's a lot of outreach that we probably in community engagement around that, because obviously that'll cause a lot of questions to pop up. But if you'd like us to include kind of that in the alternative analysis, I'm just looking at the team, I think we can
Oh, yeah.
can do that as we go through, but it would be limited to where we're mixing bikes and cars, basically, on those greenways.
I think if you can, without causing unintended consequences, if you can use motor filters, whatever we can use to avoid bikes and cars
That's right.
sharing through traffic.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's just a sign.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a motor filter.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's some speed bumps with a bike lane on the side. But I defer to you on. how
Yeah.
to-
Yeah.
I think we're comfortable putting that in there. We take a look at it. So,
Well, and if the decision now is to basically not invest on the southern stretch of 15th and maximize the use of Larkspur, that's huge, because that's what a lot of this work was going to be, was building 15th.
As one counselor, and the rest will have to weigh in, I would prefer to maximize our use of existing facilities.
Yeah.
And invest in the types of things we've talked about here, which are like sprucing up crossings.
Yeah.
Tabletops, whatever you agree
Yeah.
is going to slow down traffic and protect kids and
that's-
elders from getting hit by cars.
The whole philosophy behind neighborhood greenways
Right.
is using what you
Spend money on it.
already have. Use the
it-
roads where the speeds are already slower. Try and identify those facilities that only need
Yeah.
moderate improvement.
and we can have to
right?
holistically look at like those greenway corridors and say where would it make sense to do what and what type of options we
And
have.
if you find one
area where you know you can use a modal filter without a bunch of blowback,
Yeah.
then we can find, does it even work?
And pilot
If
it.
it works everywhere else, I think it might work
Yeah.
here.
Yep.
We can try it.
We'll have, part of the scope can be even look at the existing stretch of the Greenway on Sixth Street.
Right.
How do we further enhance that
Right.
Above, the sharrows that exist
Right.
today?
And I think when as we go to the west side too, we got opportunities
yeah, I'll
on
do that
those
as
as well.
well.
Okay, well, because we're almost at time, I just want to check in. No more decisions, Barb. Just so you- I hope, I want to say thank you to the subcommittee because it really helped us. Hopefully we brought this in at the right level, but we felt like this is a really good discussion and we're getting really clear direction from you. So I just want to say thank you.
This has all been really good, valuable time and work. I really do.
Can you
Yeah.
send us the slide of or some like screenshot of the map right now?
Yeah.
Because I won't be able to remember it.
Do you want to say like a very clear, like everything we discussed here, this is here's the north south. Yeah.
I didn't be like, oh, I didn't think of this. Or
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
That'd be great.
We can do that.
All right. Thank
Move to
you.
adjourn.
Thank you, counselors.